Alright guys, I'm doing a follow-up video about my stump grinder, ZT1844 from Bandit. Want to make sure you guys know this. They're great little machines, but you have to make sure you keep the maintenance up on them. When you're using, or once you buy one, or if you have one, you acquire one, make sure that you check all the tightness of all the nuts, bolts, washers, everything on your joystick assembly. There's a rubber boot that goes over top, so you can't see any of the assembly. What I would do is pull that boot off, check the tightnesses of everything, tighten it up. Also too, we can do is you don't want to do this except if you take one part at a time. Take one screw out, put Loctite on it, red Loctite, screw it back in, or replace each nut with lock nuts. Because what's going to happen is, over time, if you don't put Loctite on it or have lock nuts or lock washers, is eventually that joystick gets so much movement, it's eventually going to get loose. Once one thing gets loose, it puts more pressure on the other fasteners, and pretty soon the whole thing will be loosey-goosey and it'll feel like the joystick is broken. That's what happened to us. It was only at 300 hours, and then once the joystick falls apart on the end, there's nothing to hold it. Once it gets loose, it'll fall apart, and then you'll think either something's sheared off or something's missing, and then you won't know how to put it back together. So we we took ours apart, and we thought there was something missing, and basically what it was, the whole thing just fell apart, and so we didn't have a schematic to put it back together. So we tried to take it apart, and it made things worse. So when we took it to Bobcat, they couldn't fix it, and then we went through like a week without a stump grinder just because we didn't tighten those nuts and bolts down. So you'll see when you take that boot off, the joystick cover, the cover of the joystick, there's about, I don't know, 5 or 6 bolts and nuts in there, and none of them have lock nuts. They're all just basically tightened down. They just have some real thin washers in there, but what Bobcat did, they had a really good mechanic, and he was able to put it together. It took him 2 hours to figure it out, but he finally got it all back together, got it back working, and he took Loctite and he Loctited every single moving fastener on there. So he said this will not fall apart unless you take it apart. It will not wear out unless you take it apart or it gets loose. So make sure, if you have one of these, and there might be similar products out there, but I would make sure that you take your boot off, tighten everything down. If it doesn't have Loctite and it's loose, take one thing apart at a time, one bolt, Loctite it, put it back in, and do that until the whole thing is basically solid. And maybe, like I said, maybe even you can put a couple lock nuts on there as well. Alright, it's going to save you a lot of trouble. It ended up costing me almost $1,000 because I had to, I thought I needed parts. They won't sell you just one part. They have you order the whole assembly, and from Bandit. Also too, I had to run a stump grinder, which almost cost $500. And then after all that was said and done, I got a $300 and something bill for having them spend 2 hours putting it back together. So you can save yourself a lot of money just with like a $5 bottle of Loctite. So anyway, little tricks of the trade. Don't make the mistake I did. Later, guys.